Okay, Peter. So today I just really wanted to talk about the legal spat that has developed between Golden Boy, Canelo Alvarez, and DAZN. I just think it's quite an interesting spat, and people might think, oh, it's just a little legal dispute, be over soon. But actually, I think it's got quite big implications for boxing, for the promotion side and for the competition, for the sports side. So I just wanted to have a little look at that really and see how that had developed, where we were now, and the avenues it could possibly go down. So just to recap briefly, DAZN kind of came into being in 2018. They had hugely deep pockets and they wanted to set up a subscription television service. And one of the things they did, one of the first acquisitions they did, was they said, we're going to get into boxing and we're going to get into boxing big. Now, at this time, obviously Canelo Alvarez had cemented his status as the world #1 pound-for-pound fighter with his second victory over Gennady Golovkin. So very hot property. And also, kind of conveniently enough, HBO had said, listen, we're kind of done with boxing now. They had been screening Canelo's fights and they said, look, we're going to take a break from boxing. So it seemed like a great opportunity. So, Golden Boy and DAZN got together and they signed a big contract, a huge record-breaking contract in boxing. It was worth, I think, 385 million in total. And the deal was that over 5 years, Canelo would have 11 fights on DAZN and he would be guaranteed a purse of 35 million for each fight, guaranteed. Now, the deal was that they would pay Golden Boy, DAZN would pay Golden Boy 40 million per Canelo fight. 35 million of that would go straight into Canelo's pockets, 5 million being kept by Golden Boy. So far, so good, because although every fighter wants to be a pay-per-view fighter, that's seen as the way to riches. You don't actually know what you're going to get until all the receipts come in. To get 35 million as a guarantee per fight is just fantastic. I mean, to put that into context, if you were going to try and make $40 million from a pay-per-view fight, let's say you sell the pay-per-view at $80 per buy, then you have to sell 1 million, you have to get 1 million buys for the promoter to get that sort of money, because the money is normally split 50-50 between the promoter and the broadcaster. And to put that into context, Canelo's first fight with Golovkin did 1.3 million buys. His second fight did 1.1 million buys. So these are big numbers. These are stellar numbers. But Canelo had that all guaranteed. So everything seemed fine going into this deal. DAZN seemed they were a coming power in boxing. As I say, they had very deep pockets. They signed this big deal and boom, let's go. So Canelo's first fight on that deal was against Rocky Fielding. So that wasn't actually on the 35 million deal. I think he was guaranteed 15 million for that. He got paid for that by Golden Boy. That's fine. It was broadcast on DAZN. Then his next fight went straight into that. And he fought Daniel Jacobs, a leading contender at 160 pounds. Good fight, and obviously won that, got his guaranteed purse, no problems. And then moving on from that, in November 2019, he fought Kovalev up at light heavy. And again, that was a guaranteed 35 million, screened by DAZN. So, but there were rumours that things weren't going so well then, really. That was last year, because DAZN had kind of said, we want him to fight Golovkin for the third fight. And they were thinking that third fight, that trilogy fight, is going to be massive. We'd like him to do it, on the 5th of May 2020. And that's going to be a big draw for us. And that's going to really expand our subscription base. For some reason, Canelo didn't seem too keen on that fight. I could understand as a fighter who's saying, look, I've beaten the guy twice. Why do I have to beat him a third time? And this is where the dispute starts to fall down. So there were rumours that people weren't happy. Things weren't going so well in the camp. And where it breaks down, it's all come out in the legal papers that Canelo has filed. So what Canelo has basically said is that he was given a contract by Golden Boy, which said you're guaranteed 35 million per fight. Golden Boy and Canelo will decide on the opponent, with Canelo having the final say on the opponent. The contract that Golden Boy gave to DAZN said, you will have the final say on the opponent. And if you remember this playing out, Peter, in September, we were saying, oh, who's Canelo going to fight? And then some guy would pop up and it'd be rumours of this. Some guy would pop up, be rumours of that. And then things almost seemed to get to the point where Canelo was saying, this is the guy I'm going to fight. And then all of a sudden it was blown out of the water and it disappeared. And no September fight ever appeared. And that's why. Because Canelo was picking the opponents, and then DAZN was saying, no, you're not fighting that guy. It's not good enough for us. DAZN also said, listen, things have changed in the boxing world with the with the big COVID outbreak. We haven't got a live gate. And again, to put that into context for you, the gates against Golovkin were 24 million each. So that's a big chunk of change, and that really helps to pay for that fighter's purse. So going forward, DAZN said, look, we're going to have to cut the money. And at this point, Canelo said, hold on, we've got a contract. We've got a cast iron contract. In my contract, it says you will pay Golden Boy 40 million, 35 million, that comes to me. And, you know, it doesn't matter about the pay-per-view guys. It doesn't matter about anything else. I've got a guarantee from you. I've got a contract from you. So DAZN seems to have got out of this and said, no, we're not doing that. You know, we're not going to pay you that money. And Canelo has said, right, well, let's go legal then. So he's unhappy about those two things. So he's issued writs against Golden Boy and against DAZN for breach of contract. You know, in both cases, or against Golden Boy for saying you kept some of the contract from us, and against DAZN for breach of contract. Now, anybody keeping up to date with this will know, well, 2 days ago, Canelo's law sort of got thrown out, but it was only thrown out on a bit of technicality, but where he'd stated DAZN and Golden Boy were citizens of as corporate entities. So it's a little bit, you know, it's a little bit nitpicking, really. It's not a great start from his legal team, but still, he's got 7 days to file, you know, everything correctly. So that is ongoing. So that's where we're at. And what implications does this have for boxing? How does it kind of break down, and what does it mean? Well, one of the first things is, you know, I don't think this is going to be a short spat. Another thing Canelo is saying is he wants to be a free agent. So he's suing DAZN and Golden Boy for 280 million. And he's also for breach of contract. And he's also saying he wants out of the contract. Now, obviously, DAZN and Golden Boy are going to contest this. Potentially, that means for boxing, you've got the #1 pay-per-view star and the pound-for-pound #1 in the world not being able to fight. So he is sidelined. So that is obviously a bit of a disaster for boxing, really. He's in his prime. So how's that going to affect his career? And how long is that going to last for? The other thing is he could, you know, he obviously potentially, he could get out of this contract, could go the other way. He could be on the sidelines for years. He could get out of this contract and he could then become a free agent, which makes him a very attractive proposition for anybody to set up fights for him. So, you know, or he may be thinking, look, I'm going to sue him for 280 million. I'll take the 280 million. I don't know what's going through his head. But that's certainly a big retirement package, which he hasn't, if he hasn't got one already. So that sidelines him for the moment. And I think the other implication for boxing is if you cut down the tallest tree in the forest, all the other trees race up to take that place. So there's a great opportunity for someone here to become the big pay-per-view #1 pound for pound. And interestingly enough, there's that great fight coming in October between Lomachenko and Lopez. And I think it changes the ramification of that fight. It's a great fight. It's an amazing fight. And Lomachenko deserves plaudits for demanding that he fights Lopez and taking a pay cut to fight Lopez. So the two leading guys of that weight are going to come together. But you know that Willie Monroe Jr. on this show, Peter, has already picked Lopez to win that fight. And now, what's on the plate for Lopez? Well, yes, he could beat Lomachenko. Then he'd beat the #2 pound for pound fighter in the world. Well, not anymore, because the #1 is tied up in legal wrangles. So he'd beat the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world. So he would be the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world. And not only that, Peter, the #1, you know, favourite son of the Mexican boxing fans is on the sidelines, is on ice. Okay, and what a fan base to have. I mean, everybody knows how passionate the Mexican fans are. Now, it could be Lopez could become the new, you know, the new sort of chosen one of those that Mexican fan base. And what clout does that give him then? So, you know, in a way, going into this fight, which is a great fight anyway, a wonderful fight, you know, you've all of a sudden, because of Canelo sidelining, you know, for those two, there's more to play for, because Lomachenko would cement his place as world #1. But for Lopez, oh my God, you know, you could become not only the world #1 pound for pound, but the darling of the Mexican fight fans. And with Canelo sidelined, you're the one they all want to watch, and that would give you so much clout. So that's very interesting. And obviously, there's other fighters out there. You know, Gervonta Davis will be pushed to the fore by, you know, by Mayweather promotions, and lots of other fighters will want to take that crown of the #1 pound for pound biggest draw that Canelo is kind of vacating by going into this legal limbo. I think for boxing as well, it's interesting because DAZN seem to have done something that the last thing a big corporate entity wants to do. They're going to be seen to be not carrying through on their promises. They have great excuses with the coronavirus pandemic and everything else. But this spat has become very public. Now, you know, if we look back in boxing history, obviously Showtime and Floyd Mayweather, they had some arguments over their massive previous biggest deal ever, 6-fight deal with Mayweather. And, you know, maybe Showtime weren't happy with Andrew Berto. Maybe they weren't happy with Robert Guerrero, even though, you know, they did obviously get Canelo and they did get Pacquiao in the end. But those arguments, although there were rumours, were very much behind closed doors. The relationship stayed firm. And obviously when Mayweather came back to fight McGregor, he went to Showtime, you know, as his partner of choice. So, you know, kind of in a way, that's how you do it, you know. And the fact that DAZN are now having this very public argument with the #1 leading figure in boxing makes you think, well, what other fighters are going to want to go over there? Because if they sign a contract it's not a cast iron contract. You know, if somebody is going to renege on the contract, whatever their excuses. So it doesn't look great for DAZN. And DAZN may also, from their point of view, be saying, look, we're having our fingers burnt on boxing here. We don't want to do this. So we're not going to go any further with it. So where does that leave boxing, with HBO pulling out and all the other, you know, people that screen boxing kind of having full rosters? It leaves Golden Boy and Matchroom, who are filling DAZN schedules, with nowhere to go in the States. So what happens then? Well, the easy option to me, the obvious option to me, would be a bit like we're doing here, is set up your own streaming service. You know, stream your own fights, stream your own shows. But that's a big ask. You know, that's another leap, and that's not the same as saying I've got guaranteed money. That's saying I'm going to invest a lot of my own money, put it on the line, and try something that might not work. But you know, the promoters, in a way, I think, have got to do this. So I'm just seeing it as this legal spat. We've got to look at Canelo, Golden Boy, and DAZN, where it's going to take them. Could take them all into negative territory. Not many people win in these circumstances. Could sideline Canelo during the prime years of his career. Might not. He might come out of it and be a free agent. But I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people in boxing, particularly those guys that I've already mentioned, to kind of come to the fore now. And I think it's also time for the promoters to have a little bit of a rethink about how they're going to do things, with DAZN pulling out. So I just think it's a really interesting development in boxing. You know, although it may look quite negative with lawsuits flying around and everything else, you think, well, how is this all going to play out? Where are all the pieces going to drop? So it's really worth paying attention to and seeing how it goes. And you know, apart from looking at the courtroom and seeing if Canelo refiles his stuff, you know, I would very much be looking at that Lopez Lomachenko fight and see how the boxing landscape's going to look after that humdinger.